to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. Today is April 30th, 2018. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here on the West Coast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you listening and tuning in, either here live on UCY.TV or on KEPW.org in Eugene, Oregon, or on YouTube on UCY TV, where our recordings are posted every single day, about 20 minutes after the show is over. So thanks for joining us. Today we have with us a guest who is a returning guest who lives in Oklahoma, Erika Dugan. She's a journalist and a mom. She became active when her own life was impacted by contamination. So thank you, Erika, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. When I asked you what you wanted to talk about today, you stunned me. It kind of surprised me. You wanted to talk about the sacrifice zones. So why don't you talk about what a sacrifice zone is and where people, where you got that idea from?
Sure. Once we started unraveling what was making our children sick after our oldest got sick, and then our, it progressed onto our other children and myself and our animals, somewhere along there, as experts found, we had high levels of two chemicals in our water system in our home, was what the experts thought was really the problem that was making people continue to be sick. And even though we had gas leaks, we identified they stuck back with the water. So I went to, as a journalist, I'm like trying to sort through the details and decide, is this just a witch hunt? They want to blame the city instead of the gas company because they're protecting the oil and gas. I kind of worked through some of those things on my own as a journalist and went to do my own research as I'd been taught, and came across really the only things that had been published and really pushed out there about what happens when chemical exposures come into homes was through this area. It looks like they maybe did research grants or something for a while where they tried to help the areas where people couldn't afford to hire representation to help them, or, once if they found an exposure that was making their neighborhood sick, how would they handle it? And they really did never get it handled. So it turned into this, let's, fund research to get researchers to help them to prove if it's really something in these areas making them sick, blah, blah, blah. So then this came out, and there's a man that I found by the name of Steve Lerner, who had written a book called Sacrifice Zones. And I got that book and I read it and learned a lot from it, because I didn't even know what the names of the chemicals were at the time. I didn't even understand. Yeah, I'd taken basic chemistry, chemistry 2, tried to take a little chemistry in college, but struggled with it. That wasn't my thing. And
you've taken more chemistry than I have.
So, I knew that the elements and things like that, but once you got to the algebraic problems that go along with it, they lost me. But so I needed to learn, and I learned that, what this book was saying was that the rural areas, the areas where communities of race had either isolated themselves or our communities had pushed them and isolated them, became homes to industries that kind of had disregard for the rules of toxic pollutants and all of that, is basically what the Sacrifice Zones in the book was saying. But here I was living in a suburban community that had attracted home builders that were building homes from 100,000 to over 1 million, which is a lot in Oklahoma. That would be like, on a scale in California, that would be like 1 million to, 5 or 6, 7, 8 million. So, it's kind of a different scale, which I know the economy's changed that. The economy's changed that some. But so I'm sitting here reading this book going, well, we have these same things, and we have a factory down the street, but we're a nice suburban area. But we are the suburban. What happened was, we started building these communities out in the rural areas because of an attractive thing started happening in the city, and people wanted to move to the suburbs, the whole thing. So, it does still kind of fit, because the rural areas originally were the poorer areas that couldn't fight and say, hey, you're not dumping those toxins in my backyard. But so I saw this trend, and what I've kind of come to understand, that we're at this place in our country where we are acknowledging that there's too much illness, and that it's not just genetic, or if it is genetic, it's because something genetically modified it.
Yeah, and it's not our diet, unless it's genetically modified food. Yeah.
We're still fighting that diet thing. We're still working hard. We come up with the keto diet now. We're going to push that hard now. But we're still fighting that in our communities. But really, a lot of us know that the thing we have in common is the water, is the land, and the food comes from those things. And so I just found it interesting and thought it was something that we should talk to. I had journeyed through that before on my own, and I was always raised, to, like, the golden rule, respect others as they would respect you, and I wasn't raised to look down to someone because they were a certain race or whatever. And I was actually in a school system where my city, the city of Tulsa, is one that naturally chose to deal with segregation strangely, I'll just say. And we have a part of Tulsa that is still this way today, even by choice, that is segregated. And but when I was in school, we had a mayor who was like, why are we still like this? And I know it's our choice now. It's not that it's not the way it was in the 60s, but I still think it's wrong, our mayor said. And our mayor said, we need to learn how to integrate more. And he made an integration plan, and he actually like bussed people from that side of town that had decided on their own to be segregated or just stayed there because that's where they were comfortable, and and I'm not talking just people of color. It was, just communities that's how they decided, but it was predominantly a community of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I do notice that side of town had more industry, probably had more pollution. So to some extent, I was layered a little away from that, protected from that when I was younger. But I wasn't raised to be like where I didn't think you should be on my side of town. You know what I mean? I wasn't raised to be that way. And I think that the mayor, he forced that integration by sectioning off a section and saying, you're going to have to go to this school. I'm going to make you. And he made buses from our school district go over there and integrate. So, I mean, I had experiences with that where I was smart enough always to know that people are people, and there are good people and there are bad people.
Right.
But it's just been
the color of your skin does not make you superior to another person. That humans, our skin color has to do with melatonin, not our brain intellect or our differences as human beings. We're the same. We're humans.
Right, and so I'm telling you that so you understand my frame of reference. And
and how deep. Actually, it's interesting as you say that. I sort of in my head was thinking about how in the deep South you really are, like how your mayor had to force this integration and said, "We're doing this."
Yeah, and it's not just because.
But that's one of the things Lerner talks about. This morning, I found an article in the public, what's it called? The Environmental Health Perspectives. It's a journal, right? A scientific journal. And it's written by Steve Lerner. And he said one of the things they've discovered is that it was typically considered these communities as sacrifice zones were for the people on the wrong side of the tracks, the throwaway communities. However, he realized there's someone called Bean that discovered environmental injustice isn't just a poverty thing, that it's beginning. It says Lerner assesses the diverse strategies used by affected communities to win legal settlements. That's what he does. But he discovered that it's not. It originally started as just the wrong side of the tracks thing, and now it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I just find, that's why I thought we should just talk about it, because I just find it interesting, some of us that really speak out hard against what's happening to the environment would be labeled as like a social justice warrior, is the cool term of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my son's talked about that. As we fight this, I don't want to be a social justice warrior, Mom. That's not me. And
I don't want to be deemed anything that's related to war. That's my thing. Like Kevin Blanche, who had the Post-Ignorance Project, used to say, "Oh, we're my little army," and I'm like, "Don't call me part of your army. I am not interested in being anything related to war." But the fact is, this is kind of World War III. This is the war of the world that we are really going to. This is the enemy, and it is us. I mean, our complacency is the enemy, I think.
Yeah, and us not knowing what was really going on or blaming it on something else.
Yeah, but you know what, Erika? Now people know. So this is what we could discuss this, is you're in a community where, like, how do we get people to move from knowing and taking action? I think a lot of it has to do with, like, figuring out a way to help people get over their sense of guilt over doing nothing, even when they've seen it coming.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to, why I just referenced this and why we isolate ourselves in communities, even when there's laws that say you don't have to anymore, And it's that level of comfort that, the famous, all we have to fear is fear itself. And it's that we don't want to risk stepping out for our neighbor and saying, hey, I was sick too and she's right, and we don't want to risk that because look at what they've done to them or look at what they did to the other person I know. And so to get to the place of understanding, I guess is what I'll call it, and how my son made me see that that's what we need to talk about. That's what we need to all be talking about, is how do we get to a place of understanding. Because it's funny, he found a fortune cookie and it says you don't need strength to let go of something. What you really need is understanding. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about letting go of old beliefs, letting go of our fear that we might not be who we used to be, or we might lose
who we
more.
think we were.
Yeah. And move through that to find a place of understanding. Does that mean that everyone will lose their wealth because we spread it around more? I don't think so. I think it will be a way to gain more wealth, but it's scary, it's complex, it's something we haven't all done before, and it's just that whole what happens with change, and so that's what I think. And how do we get there is first by saying, yes, these things are happening, yes, these things are real, and then what science, what products, what help do we need to fix these, instead of saying, well, I'm just going to protect these companies and let them do whatever they want, and I'm going to come after you because you're bothering them, and I think that's how we get to a place of understanding. But when you're the owner of the company, what do you do with your waste? I mean, if the government's just telling you can't dump it, it'd be like if you're a child being raised in a home and you have a dad that's like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Okay, well, what can I do? So on the company side, I still see how they're like, well, what can I do? And
well, it's not just that. They're concerned
how can I afford to do that?
Well, if they acknowledge it, then they might have to acknowledge the liability that they have to accept that they've caused in the community. So that's part of their, it has nothing to do, I think, less to do with their concern about how are we going to fix it, and more about their concern about their total liability. This is why the nuclear industry has complete indemnity. Nobody in the nuclear industry can be held accountable whatsoever for any harm they cause, period. It is a shock, but it's true. Whereas in the chemical, remember that guy from the coal industry, I think his name was Blankenship, he went to jail actually for a year for causing harm from the from the coal miners. Remember when those guys died, and he actually got convicted and had to go to jail for a year?
Oh yeah, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, so, I mean, he did do time in a jail. He did get a conviction. That's a lot more. This is why they deny it, Erika. And this is part of the social justice conversation that is constantly ignored, is that we have already allowed the nuclear industry complete indemnity for one of the worst toxins. And the chemicals, this is why the denial that you encounter is so severe, because they don't want you think those doctors want to start blaming the number one employer in the community for all the health problems?
I know they don't want to, but
yes,
like I said, there has to be a place of understanding. We can't just keep denying it, because it's just, it's become its own cancer.
It becomes a point of ethics and honor. If you say you're a Christian, if you believe at all in any type of higher power or God or any type of a planet like that, to just completely deny this is inhumane, in my view, and it's antithetical to your core beliefs.
Well, and what's crazy is, before, what made us have to find what was causing it, which, we kept having recurring illness, so I don't know, maybe we would have just had to find it anyway, but really what made us have to bring more people in was that our insurance didn't approve our medication in the first place, and we had to fight so hard for that, and then we had to go out of state to get expert doctors to help us when there was probably someone in the state who could help us, but our insurance didn't want to pay them. So this is the ugly thing we create, is if they wanted to just keep it hidden and they wanted to just say,
they should have had single payer.
Yeah, then we should have just not had the insurance give people such a hard time about this medication that's expensive for the people who maybe they have been exposed too much, and that's why we have to be on that medication to, but that really, if they wanted to keep it under the indemnity, as you're saying, then those processes broke down first to make it where people could find, and we had to talk about it more.
That motivated you to have to do it. Now, have your medical issues...
The indemnity isn't even working, is what I'm saying, because your people involved with the indemnity aren't on the right team. They're not helping keep the indemnity.
This is the interesting thing, is that you'd think that they would want to keep people quiet and just pay their medical bills. Because what's going to make people speak out is the fact that, like if your medical bills had been getting paid and you would have been able to find medication, you'd be frustrated, but you would be willing to deal with this.
Yeah, I'd still be having my quality of life to some extent. I'd be broker from having to pay for all the medical stuff, but I'd still
but you would not be speaking out, and you would not be trying to tell America that, you know what, the fracking industry is not only, the net result is it is killing people. And it is harming people, making people very sick and destroying their quality of life. That's essentially what you're saying. It's not just about the medical bills. If your medical bills had been paid, however, you probably would not be speaking out.
Right, because I had no knowledge of what was really the underlying problem, and no one was really interested in finding the underlying problem until it got to a point where they wouldn't pay, and we had to figure out something, and we were determined to find the truth as to why they wouldn't pay, why we were still sick, and because, we didn't fit the mold. We weren't people who you could just lie and say, oh, it's because you drank forever. Oh, it's because
you're smoking.
Did recreational drugs. So there was no... Yeah, and we didn't smoke. We grew up in a time where they said, don't smoke. And, I lived with some family members off and on that, like, extended family that smoked, and the smell made me sick. So, a friend passed me a cigarette. I'm like, no, that stuff's nasty. It stinks up your car. I don't want it, So it didn't help. Teaching us to be good didn't save us all, even if, if that was originally thought to be the underlying problem. It didn't save us all, because we still had stuff in our water, in our air, in our soil. And we were kind of proof of that. So, that's what we've ended up. I don't know. I haven't got to tell you, but our case did get dismissed. And
it did?
Be shocked. Yeah, I know you're going to be shocked over that and upset.
Why? Why did it get dismissed?
Well, we had all the parties, which I think was originally 29 parties, I think, and we narrowed it to like 24 because some of them we found, were linked to each other, so we combined them. And we went through the whole process and wrote they'd send in a motion to dismiss each of the parties that we sued, and we'd have a motion asking them not to dismiss and write why, and more things would come out in those that why that other things that we knew specific to that party that weren't in the big lumped complaint would have to come out in those. So I knew there was a risk that it might be dismissed, because really all of that information back and forth had made our complaint even bigger. You know what I mean? That had shown that the more horrible things that had happened to us for more years based on that individual party when we kind of comment back and forth.
I'm not actually shocked, but I'm curious to see what you ended up getting more information out of the back and forth, though, right? What was the reason for dismissal?
Well, we got more information, but not too much, because, there are high-level lawyers that are too smart to give us too much more information, but it allowed us to tell the court how much more and to show the court how we had really narrowed our problems in the complaint. But I was always scared that that would give grounds for them to say there's just too much and I'm not going to deal with it. I was always scared of that. And then when we got it was weird. It wasn't like a ruling. It was just an order. And it does have a little place where it says I'm going to dismiss it. But it was very untypical compared. I had gone to the law school and I had looked up things from the same judge to try to understand what I was going to be up against next, because taking this on pro se, I just had to try to learn as much as I could. And I was just, someone who was blind, feeling my way around in the dark. And I got this information, and this thing that I received didn't look anything like those to me. And I don't know if it just gets put in like the Westlaw system different later or whatever. I didn't know. And I was really not knowing what I was looking at. And I can tell you my initial thought was just, this is more corruption. This is just more corruption. And the judge is on their side, and he has just screwed us, And that was my initial thought. And then I let that kind of fall in for a while and feel that, and decided how I was going to talk to someone else about it that really knew what it meant, because I didn't know. We all kind of read it in our family, and we all just had that feeling of, here we are again, we're still not getting anywhere. And we didn't really know what it said, but we just all knew we had that feeling, and we knew we were finished with this piece, and here we'd fought another fight and we'd lost, is what it felt like. But I came to realize that it wasn't a total loss. It was one of those, just because you've lost this doesn't mean you've lost the whole thing.
It was round one.
I've come to learn that that's what complex cases in the law are.
Right.
And that's how it works.
That's exactly.
And I did not know that, and this is what I could teach people from doing pro se, is the reason that sometimes a lawyer won't take your case isn't because, and they'll tell you, it's not because you don't have a case. It's because it's something like ours was, where it's so many layers, so many years. No one has the energy, the time, or the money to help you. And so that's what we knew ours was, and that's why we tried to take it on ourselves. But I didn't know that would mean, I didn't really know what that would mean in this stage. And what I've come to learn, giving it more time, talking to more people, is what actually the judge said is that these people have been through too much, and it's crazy and it's awful. But I'm not going to just step up and help you, because that's not my job, and the court can't handle that burden. And it is such a huge, horrendous thing that's developed but I'll tell you, these are the two areas I see that you can bring it back to me, and we can deal with it that way. But you need to find somebody to help you do it, because I'm not going to help you. And
you need a lawyer, in other words. Get legal help.
Right.
Okay.
So we have been fortunate to find somebody, and we have been fortunate to come to an understanding that there's two areas in the federal law that he thought that he saw in all the, basically he cleaned up all the throw up and he said, these are the two areas I keep seeing. So do something about these two areas. And so that's what
are the doing. Two areas? You're keeping us in the dark.
Yeah, it's equal. Well, I mean, it's a public case. You could look it up and read it. So I think it's fine for me to tell you. But the two areas are due process and RICO.
Okay.
But RICO is very narrowed, and he explained how we don't have, any of the elements he would want us to have, and how we still have to do more work on that. And it's still, to some extent, it's a puzzle pleading, but he never said that it wasn't true. He did say a little statement in there about, trying to think what he said about, there's a little statement on how maybe they're trying to use the statute of limitation to get around the statute of limitations using this because the illnesses keep recurring and maybe they're not related. But I didn't know if he did that to help us get care in the meantime or if he did that because he really believed that. But what I was reminded of is we had a report in our case early on with the complaint that's from an environmental physician that was appointed by Poison Control. It's not like we went and found her and paid her. You know, she was appointed. She was definitely a third party, and she went through our story, went through our records, went through everything. And one of the statements at the end of her report says that no doctor ever, unless they are a clinical toxicologist or something who's actually, been taking care of us, seen us, could ever say that the things are not related. And so the judge basically didn't have a role to say that because he's not a physician, and that was there in the papers, but, we provided a lot of papers, and he could have missed it. So
are you guys filing a lawsuit?
I never understand
again?
the motivations in this legal game. So
yeah, are you filing a lawsuit with under one of those separate things that he's directed you to, or doing them again? I mean, you say you found representation.
Yeah, we've been told he is the senior judge in the court, and we absolutely are doing that. We have to do that, and So it continues. What you've learned is this has just been round one, and you were instructed by the court to get legal counsel. That this really is, the fact is, it's interesting because he even acknowledged that this is a grave situation. If he thought it was frivolous, he would have just thrown it out, right? They don't waste their time. And so
but it's not frivolous. So that's good news in the move towards getting social justice. You know what I mean? Like that for you and your family, and this will affect hundreds of thousands of people in your state when this actually gets taken care of.
And it needs to, because there have just been too many deaths, and it needs to happen. But it is like we come back to this. I do believe like those areas, those sacrifice zones, probably have some level where they have been affected more. And that's what we saw with Obamacare. How are we going to get those people care and quit just treating them like, oh, they're just welfare assistance people, and they just don't want to do for themselves. And it's like someone along the way came to learn it's not that they don't want to, maybe they can't. Maybe they're, need actual care, whether it's because they had behaviors that cause this, or it's because they lived in a polluted area that caused this, or it's all of the above. If you want them to be productive, you have to heal them. So that's what I think, that we just knew there was this policy in Obamacare, and those of us that weren't directly involved with it didn't understand why we need that, but we do, and we still need to continue to fight for that, because that's how we have. That's my point of this, is the environmental justice is the piece of our equality that we have said our country is and needs to be. Having that real environmental justice is how we get to more, but there's so many pieces of it, and it's so scary, and how do we find that place of understanding? That's, I think, what we
I think, for me, I think it's just about demanding that we don't protect corporations from polluting the environment. If there was a penalty to pay, they would stop doing it, first off. But there's no penalty to pay. I mean, look what's happened to your community, you and all the people in your community. How long is it taking you to get to this point? I mean, that's real environmental justice, is just stop allowing them to do it and open up the medical system. Medicare for all. Nobody gets denied medical care. You get the care you need, period. It's beyond comprehension that Americans in this country are willing to go along with the most inhumane system in the free world, to be honest. And frankly, we're giving up our freedoms. Even that, the free world, we're saying that sort of halfway now these days, because most of us recognize that we're being spied on from our government, and if you get out of line, you're going to be manhandled by the cops, or, I venture to say that you have had some harassment in your own community.
Yes, definitely.
So.
And I think that's a part of that fear piece for the other side. That's how they deal with the fear. I'm going to shut you down and make you shut up. And if I've told you to shut up and you won't, then I'll find ways to make you shut up. I heard someone recently that's having kind of a legal battle with someone of power in our state, and they were telling their friends that he had told them early on that he was going to end their existence. And the friends heard that as he made a death threat and was going to kill them. I'm like, end your existence to someone of power doesn't necessarily have to be like a murder. It could be making it where your bank isn't doing you properly and your money is disappearing out of your own bank account.
Exactly. Read it. The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's the bottom line,
Yeah, so it means different things in our time, in our society, and we've endured some of those things, and that has been, I thought that our country was more protected than that, more just than that, more non-criminal than that. So that's been very hard for me to absorb. But
well, this is the thing here. Our country has a system so that we could actually make it that way if we could get people engaged and vote in politicians who will pass those laws and enforce that theory. I mean, in theory, we could have that, like universal health care. We could have universal health care if we decided we were going to have it. But most Americans are like, well, they're willing to buy the arguments. They're willing to buy the propaganda. Anytime anything comes out against major corporations, we see a propaganda blitz on television that changes people's minds.
Well, and the universal health care would cause changes that would harm people, because
that's bull.
Imagine
that.
how it was.
I reject that. We have a Medicare for all. We have a Medicare system that is handled by Humana. It is a mega health insurance industry corporation. We could have all of these health insurance companies send their bills to Medicare, and they could get the care they needed. We could take the caps. We could make a cap on CEO pay so that if you run a healthcare company, you can't make more than $2 million. Okay, you want to make $1 million, even $2, got it. You can be rich. How much money do you want? But you're not entitled to $32 million CEO pay when you are denying health care to people. So I don't buy that argument, Erika. Talk about pushing my button. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. I guess what I meant is I see that as we started, there would be harms, because I don't know.
There's already harms.
Right, like what we've endured already. That's what I mean, like what we've endured already. Even when the ACA plans came out and they put everything online, people could tell you their horror stories of how, that initial change causes the people who aren't wealthy to lose more at first.
See, this is the deal. It wouldn't have to affect more. People just get assigned their doctors. And you just say, hey, every doctor is available to you. You go to a doctor, the doctor submit the bills to the government. Now, the issue would be we're going to be dealing with a lot. Honestly, I think we would see some big senators get murdered. I don't think in this country that they would allow single-payer health care. I mean, we live in a mafia. Bobby Kennedy killed off the mafia, and they killed off Bobby Kennedy, and ever since then, the mafia has run the country. We have Don sitting in the White House. He runs this government like a mafia Don. That's why he got rid of all the qualified people. He doesn't want qualified people around him. I think we're in a high state of denial in our country, and people like us who are paying attention, like you've been affected severely, and you were right about this.
There are things that we had that we lost with the ACA, which I do believe, especially knowing all that I know, I do believe we need it. And I don't believe it was wrong to have it. Is it the right thing? Definitely not. Has it tried to be the right thing? Has it been something? Yes. Has it messed up the processes? Yes. That's what I guess that's what I mean is we need someone to craft it. I think that universal health care would be right if someone would craft it where there's not these associated damages because they're unthoughtful.
We have it.
What's going to happen to the people that have fought for certain things?
To be honest, we have the legislation written. It's already written. It's called Medicare for All. It solves the problem. There's no mega Obamacare. You have to redo it and get quotes and do all this other stuff. It's a very simple program. You could look into the program yourself. Bernie Sanders has it, I think, still on his website. It's legislation already there that they will not submit to even be discussed. Yeah. So the legislation is written, and this is how it would work. Everybody gets issued, just like it would take about 2 months to roll out, everybody gets issued a Medicare card. And then the insurance companies begin to submit their things to the government, but no more gouging, and CEO pay goes away. Bye-bye, $32 million, $100 million CEO pay doesn't exist anymore. That's why we don't have it.
Well, on the other side of you, I would like it to not be involved with any kind of insurance company. I see that.
Well, that's essentially what would happen is the insurance companies go in the Medicare for All plan. Insurance companies get phased out, but their administrative services get bought out by the government. Like the services, like the things that make the VA work is because the VA is independent of all the insurance companies. So it'd be run just like the VA. Like this current idea to privatize the VA is going to be a disaster if people let that happen. Because the reason we don't have major problems, hold on. Oh my God. I thought of this. Hold on already. There. I was able to remember to bring my phone nearby me so I can mute it. So, but the reason we don't have, the VA, imagine if the VA got privatized, how many more medical people we would have in the system breaking the system. I mean, I think we are on a precipice of Americans need to step up to the plate and get engaged, period. It's no longer, people say, well, I don't like politics. Too bad, because politics likes you, We're the tool of these politicians. One of the things I was reading this article that I referenced earlier. Let me read this. It's just a 2-sentence thing, but it's very interesting. It's a paragraph. Grassroots community leaders, most of whom are led by women of color and retired persons, are taking up the leadership mantle of environmental justice and health equity. Leaders in sacrifice zones have used the environmental justice movement to leverage power imbalance between polluting industries and fence-line residents, understanding that the struggle is not a sprint, but more akin to a marathon. The case studies detail how race and class affect health outcome. Learner asks, why do grandmothers have to perform the work government regulators should be doing?
Well, and that's where I haven't got to tell you that the judge did protect the government.
Of course he did.
And he did say that, at least from his perspective, he was going to consider them sovereign. And we could not sue the EPA. We could not sue the Social Security. We could not sue NIH. And we could not sue the IRS because those are where we had proved we had experienced angst in all those areas. But he did learn from what we had put together, and he did say that we could sue the individuals in their individual capacity. So what he was saying is, I'm not going to let these people say that they are our government. They are people. They are people who make up our government. And he, of course, didn't use these words, but this is how we've interpreted it. They are people who make up our government, and they are people maybe who shouldn't have been making decisions for our government. So, and they made bad decisions for our government. So the government is made up of people, and these people are people that have done you wrong, is what I gathered him to say, for him pushing it to even bring out and say, no, you're not going to do this on a government level, but you can do this on an individual
Why
level.
did he say
and
the government
granting
could not
that.
be sued, though?
He
because
said I'm granting that.
But the government allowed these things to happen, so why couldn't you sue the government?
I know. I struggled with that a lot. Like I said, I'm talking to you over a month after I received this about.
Right.
And
what did the attorney say? Did you talk to the attorney about that?
What did he time to process? No one really seems surprised. They know there's a whole area of fighting the sovereign, and there's experts, and there's legal experts on how to fight the sovereign. And I guess if we just would choose to do that, we would have to go and find that.
That's true. I mean, the sovereign, that's what makes you sovereign, is you can do anything within your area of authority. That's what makes you sovereign.
But I did some reading on that, and that actually comes from, England. When we migrated, we had, populations that migrated over from England. But that is not the Constitution, and our federal processes have to go by the Constitution, and there is nothing about the sovereign in the Constitution. So I have struggled personally with that.
And what did your attorney say to that?
They are like, this is the senior judge, and the judge has spoken, so they move on from it. All of the different ones.
Can't you challenge that and take it to a higher court?
You can, but you have to have someone that would do that for you, and I've not
found anybody that would litigate that.
Yeah,
because it's really
yet, but I don't know.
Even if they wanted to, it's just such a waste of time. I get it.
Right.
Because it's not like it's a slam dunk, we're going to win. It's a lot of work, and the chips are stacked against you. So move on to something you can win. Let's get get you some results that help your family. That's kind of the bottom line.
And that is still a struggle for me because, I thought when we finally got to the point where we were with the EPA, and I know they fine people, and I know people in our community who have been fined. I think I told you on another show, like home builders who, the dirt runs off their property and they didn't have a silt fence up. They get fined. So I was like, yay, we're with the EPA. This will get resolved. And I quickly saw that they weren't on my side. And I learned that they were saying, well, there's this new rule that we're going to help your city, fight up against you on, because we're going to say they met this rule. And they even went and filed it several months after finding our exposures. It's like they created the rule just to defend them, but they filed it after. And I found in, since I'm a journalist, I found in records where they filed it after. And so I'm like, how can you know in my case that they did this and filed it after? But I mean, the judge is saying, well, it wasn't the whole EPA as a office that filed it after. It was those people that decided to come on the side of the ones who had polluted, and those people who decided to defend them by filing the rule. And maybe there was a senator or someone, or it looks like it was an attorney general above that maybe said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go file this, and you're going to do it with us. You're going to do it. So those are the people that it's going to come down to. And I've kind of settled with that a little better because it would be like if you owned a company and you had certain people working for you in your company that decided to do things. You were just letting them do their job and decided to do things. And if I was the owner of the company, I would feel it was very unjust and unfair that my whole company had to shut down or my whole company had to pay because these 3 employees went out and were doing something as a capacity in their job that I trusted them to do, and they were doing something wrong. So I would want them to be individuals too. So I've had to try to relook at it like that and say, if
yeah,
I
but
was
you know what
pet,
it does do is it does deny, at least at the EPA. I don't know, however, what about the other agencies, but it denies the culture of denial. Like these individuals at the EPA, yes, they were doing some horrendous things to you, but that was accepted within their culture. This was normal. They were expected to do it. And if you were to sue them, I venture to say that is going to be their defense.
Right. Well, it wasn't their culture. It wasn't normal. I know that you remember, too, probably the media was trying to help. The EPA was changing. It was well known that there were problems with certain industries and that the EPA was on to them. And so those that were on to them were pushed out, so it was that same bullying
that's what I'm seeing. Those ones, exactly, but they were pushed out of the EPA. That's the culture at the EPA, that by the judge indemnifying the EPA, saying you can't sue them. If you were to sue the individuals, when the individuals go to court, that can be their defense. Well, that was what we were expected to do. That was our job.
Because Senator so-and-so or
so-and-so
told me.
Or that was like what my supervisor
said. And I work
said.
for the government.
And like his supervisor, and I have to take my supervisor's suggestions. And, I venture to say that this is just a culture within it. But are you going to sue these individuals?
I don't know yet.
I'd be willing to sue them just because that would force out that conversation.
If you ask me, I say yes, but is who's helping me willing to do that yet?
Right.
I don't know yet.
Right.
I don't know yet.
Right.
Is that important to our world? Is that going to make the right changes?
It might, because it might open up that whole conversation about the culture within that agency. And actually, can you imagine now what it's like with Scott Pruitt at the agency? Lord, they could care less right now. Imagine how many people right now are being made sick right now that don't even realize it from the lack of regulation and the lack of oversight that's happening right now. We're in a serious time now, and I'm glad that you're out there advocating for yourself and speaking out about it, because it does help people. I think it helps people put their courage feet on it. I think it helps people have some courage to recognize they don't have to take whatever it is dealing with themselves.
Well, and we dealt with a lot of different individuals, and there are 3 that I narrowed it down and named they were in official capacity for the government. And I told the court I was, blaming them in official capacity because I had proof that the 3 of them had, really gone onto the industry side and done something wrong. And like I said, I've been about trying to research what part is what and what's really happening, not just what people are telling me, because that's my nature as a journalist, to be objective, and that's just my nature as a person. I wouldn't want to wrongfully blame someone and that's why these things do take so long, too, is because they are so, wrapped up in a ball with so many pieces and so many people interacting, and you have to kind of dissect it and unroll the yarn off the ball and figure out what's what. And so I did name those 3. And so I know those are the 3 he was speaking about in particular. And I was kind of disappointed, like I said, because they I did show where in their official capacity they acted to do these things to us as their capacity in that job. And they were not on the public interest side. They were not. And they took an oath to be on the public interest side. And so I did show that, but yeah, that was how. But I guess in these things I've learned, when it is so hard and complex, you don't ever really win. You win pieces. You find ways to get to the next fight, but you don't really win like you should. And that's wrong, I think. But
welcome to the real world.
Right. It is the real. That's what I've come to learn is I don't live in that law world. I didn't live in the medical world. I didn't live, and I didn't understand. That's kind of how they work to keep those worlds functioning and to be able to deal with all the many facets that they deal with. And that's where I have to come to my own place of understanding and still feel like things about that are wrong.
It is a really sobering moment when you realize that the system, when we say that corporations, have rights, that they actually have rights, and the government can. I mean, essentially what this judge said was that the government has a right to harm the community if it deems it necessary. It's a sovereign.
Yeah, and that is not America to me. That is England. That is not
That's
America.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's why I'm curious, I wonder why they would not challenge that. And probably because it just takes too long. I mean, that might be something you may want to end up challenging anyways, find another attorney to just challenge that one thing. Because that means if you allow that to stand and say, well, we're not going to do it because it's a sovereign, and everybody keeps not challenging it because it's just going to take too long, then it becomes precedent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's then it becomes case law. This is the downside to the legalese world,
And know that I argued that, and know that I found position papers from people,
what did they say?
Lawyers at Harvard that argued that whole sovereign thing, and that helped me, and I pulled pieces of that and gave that to the court, but I still lost that fight. I feel like,
right.
And I fought it hard. I really did, because I really feel, just as a citizen, not even learning about the law, I really feel that the laws of our country are right, and that interpretation of them is wrong. And I felt that when was
then
the
you need
U.S.
to keep
Attorney's
looking for
Office
an attorney,
that brought
because
that up.
you should keep looking for an attorney to help you, Erika, on just that one issue. Don't forget about it. If you really believe that strongly, like you don't have a million other things to do.
Well, if someone is listening to your show and they know someone, my phone number.
Yeah, get in touch with me, and we'll get you in touch with Erika Dugan. So.
And my attorney would probably work with them. She agrees with that, I'm sure.
Well, look, we've got 45 seconds left. You've been listening to Erika Dugan, an Oklahoma, an activist standing up for her family. She's a journalist who's been affected, and it's always a delight and interesting, very interesting to have you on, Erika. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All right.
Talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Put your courage feet on.